You wake up alone again, and that familiar question hits you. Am I missing something essential by living without a woman's touch? Or am I discovering something most men never find? Friedrich Nietzsche spent most of his life in profound solitude, and from that isolation emerged ideas that continue to shake the world over a century later. What if everything you've been told about needing feminine companionship to be complete is actually keeping you from becoming the man you're meant to be? What if your solitude isn't a problem to solve, but a superpower to harness? Women function as mirrors that reflect back your deepest truths, both beautiful and ugly. Nietzsche recognized that the feminine presence in a man's life serves as a constant feedback system, showing him exactly who he is through her reactions, emotions, and responses. When you live without this mirror, you lose the external validation but gain something far more valuable, the ability to see yourself clearly without distortion. The woman who loves you will often reflect back your potential, making you feel capable and strong. But she also reflects your failures, your moments of weakness, your inability to live up to your own standards. This mirroring effect creates a dangerous dependency that most men never recognize. You begin to define yourself through her eyes rather than your own vision. Her moods become your emotional weather. Her approval becomes your measure of success. Nietzsche understood that this external validation, while temporarily satisfying, prevents authentic self-knowledge. The man who exists alone must become his own mirror, developing the brutal honesty needed to see himself without the softening filter of feminine perception. Without the feminine mirror, you're forced to develop internal judgment and self-awareness. This is initially disorienting because you lose the comfortable feedback loop that relationships provide. But gradually, you develop a more authentic relationship with yourself. You stop performing for an audience and start living from your core. The solitary man learns to trust his own perceptions and judgments rather than seeking confirmation from others. Emotional dependency is the silent killer of masculine potential that Nietzsche warned against throughout his works. When men become emotionally dependent on women, they sacrifice their individual will to power for the comfort of shared existence. You start making decisions based on maintaining harmony rather than pursuing your highest potential. Your goals become diluted, your ambitions compromised, and your authentic self buried under layers of accommodation and people-pleasing. The dependent man stops asking what he wants from life and starts asking what she needs from him. This dependency creates a psychological prison disguised as love. You begin to fear solitude because you've forgotten how to generate your own emotional stability. Your moods become reactive to her emotional state. Your confidence depends on her validation. Nietzsche saw this as a form of spiritual weakness that prevents men from achieving their true nature. The emotionally dependent man cannot create new values or challenge existing systems because he's too invested in maintaining the status quo of his relationship. The man who lives alone, without feminine touch, is forced to develop emotional self-sufficiency. He learns to process his feelings without external validation, to find joy without shared experiences, and to create meaning without consensus. This emotional independence is terrifying at first, but ultimately liberating. You discover that your emotional well-being is entirely within your control, not dependent on another person's presence or approval. This is the foundation of Nietzschean self-mastery. Nietzsche's concept of creating your own values becomes crystal clear when you live without feminine influence. Most men inherit their moral framework from society, family, and relationships, without ever questioning these borrowed beliefs. When you exist alone, you're forced to examine every value you hold and ask the fundamental question: do I believe this because it's true for me, or because someone else told me it should be true? The solitary man has no choice but to become a philosopher of his own existence, determining what matters based on his direct experience rather than external expectations. Without a woman's perspective constantly influencing your decisions, you develop the courage to pursue goals that others might consider selfish, dangerous, or unconventional. You stop filtering your ambitions through the lens of what would make a good partner or provider and start focusing on what would make you feel most alive. This isn't about becoming inconsiderate. It's about developing the strength to live according to your authentic nature rather than performing a role designed to attract or maintain relationships. The process of creating values in isolation requires brutal honesty about your desires, fears, and capabilities. You can't hide behind the comfortable fiction that you're making sacrifices for love when those sacrifices might actually be avoidance of your own potential. The man who determines his own values becomes dangerous to systems that rely on conformity and compromise. He represents the possibility that men can live according to their own vision rather than society's expectations. Nietzsche himself lived much of his life in profound solitude, and from this isolation emerged some of philosophy's most revolutionary ideas. The creative man requires periods of deep solitude to access his authentic voice without the influence of others' expectations or judgments. When you live without feminine touch, you eliminate one of the most powerful sources of creative compromise, the desire to create something that will impress or please your partner. Your art, your writing, your business ventures become pure expressions of your inner world rather than collaborative efforts shaped by someone else's vision. The solitary creative process is brutal because you have no external validation to cushion the inevitable moments of doubt and frustration. Every creative decision must be made from your own judgment. Every artistic choice reflects your authentic taste rather than a compromise between two perspectives. This forces you to develop confidence in your own creative instincts and to trust your unique vision, even when it seems strange or unmarketable. The man who creates alone develops a distinctive voice that cannot be replicated or diluted by external influence. Most men abandon their creative dreams when they enter relationships because their energy gets redirected toward building a life with someone else. The practical demands of partnership often crowd out the impractical pursuit of artistic expression. But the man who chooses solitude can dedicate his full creative energy to his work without guilt or distraction. His loneliness becomes the raw material for authentic creation rather than something to be avoided or medicated through companionship. Nietzsche's concept of moving beyond good and evil applies directly to how society judges men who choose solitude over partnership. The world tells you that a man without a woman is incomplete, selfish, or somehow defective. These moral judgments keep most men trapped in relationships that drain their energy and limit their potential. When you live alone without feminine touch, you step beyond these societal value systems and create your own framework for what constitutes a meaningful life. You stop accepting the assumption that partnership equals happiness and start questioning why this belief is so universally promoted. The man who rejects traditional relationship expectations faces intense social pressure and judgment. Family members worry about your future. Friends assume you're afraid of commitment. Society treats you as an incomplete version of what you should become. But Nietzsche understood that these external judgments are tools of control designed to keep individuals conforming to collective expectations. The moment you stop caring about being judged as good or bad based on your relationship status, you gain tremendous freedom to pursue what actually fulfills you. This freedom beyond social judgment allows you to experiment with different ways of living without the constant need to justify your choices to others. You can pursue unconventional goals, take risks that might seem irresponsible to a partner, and dedicate yourself completely to pursuits that married men might consider selfish. The solitary man becomes a living example that there are multiple valid ways to exist as a human being. Nietzsche's will to power takes on a different dimension when you live without feminine touch and learn to redirect sexual energy into personal achievement. Most men dissipate this powerful force through constant sexual gratification or romantic pursuit, never realizing that this same energy can fuel extraordinary accomplishment. The solitary man discovers that sexual energy is creative energy in its rawest form. When not released through physical intimacy, it transforms into drive, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. This isn't about sexual repression, but about conscious redirection of life force toward building something greater than temporary pleasure. The practice of sublimating sexual energy into achievement requires discipline that most men never develop. Without the easy outlet of romantic relationships, you're forced to find other ways to express your masculine energy. This might manifest as intense focus on your career, physical training that pushes your limits, or creative projects that demand your complete attention. The energy that would normally be spent pursuing women or maintaining relationships becomes available for self-improvement and goal achievement. This is the secret behind many great men throughout history who accomplished extraordinary things while living largely solitary lives. Living without feminine touch teaches you that sexual energy is not something you need to discharge, but something you can harness for personal transformation. The man who masters this redirection becomes formidable because he's not dependent on external sources for satisfaction. His power comes from within, generated by his own discipline and channeled toward his chosen goals, rather than dissipated. Through constant romantic and sexual distraction, Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence becomes particularly powerful when applied to the solitary life. If you had to live your exact life over and over again for eternity, would you choose the same path of solitude and self-development? Or would you rush into relationships to avoid confronting yourself? The man who lives alone without feminine touch must honestly evaluate whether his choices stem from authentic preference or fear of intimacy. This philosophical test reveals whether your solitude is empowering or merely escapist. Whether you're building something meaningful or simply avoiding life's challenges, the eternal recurrence forces you to examine every aspect of your solitary existence with brutal honesty. Are you using your alone time to become stronger, more creative and more self-aware, or are you wasting it on distractions and comfort-seeking behaviors? If you had to repeat today's choices forever, would you be proud of how you spent your energy and attention? This perspective transforms mundane daily decisions into opportunities for conscious self-creation. Every hour becomes precious when viewed through the lens of eternal repetition. Living as if each day would recur eternally eliminates the luxury of procrastination and mediocrity. You can't justify wasting time on meaningless activities or avoiding difficult but necessary growth if you must repeat these choices infinitely. The solitary man who embraces eternal recurrence becomes intensely focused on making each moment count. His alone time becomes sacred space for self-improvement rather than mere escape from social obligations. Nietzsche's concept of the last man represents everything he despised about modern humanity. The comfort-seeking, risk-averse individual who prioritizes safety and pleasure over growth and achievement. Most men who desperately seek feminine companionship are actually pursuing the comfortable life of the last man, wanting someone to share their burdens and make existence easier rather than more meaningful. The man who lives alone without feminine Touch is forced to confront whether he's using solitude to become an Ubermensch or simply another version of the last man who avoids relationships because they require effort and vulnerability. The last man seeks comfort above all else. He wants predictable routines, emotional safety, and minimal challenge to his worldview. Many solitary men fall into this trap, using their alone time for endless entertainment, consumption, and avoidance of difficulty, rather than self-overcoming. They mistake isolation for independence and comfort for strength. The true test of the solitary man is whether his lifestyle produces growth or stagnation, whether he's building something extraordinary or simply avoiding the challenges that relationships and social engagement provide. The Ubermensch, by contrast, uses solitude as a laboratory for self-experimentation and growth. He pushes himself beyond comfortable limits, challenges his own beliefs, and constantly seeks to overcome his previous self. The man who lives alone has the perfect environment to become an Ubermensch if he chooses difficulty over comfort and growth over safety. His solitude becomes a crucible for transformation rather than a hiding place from life's demands. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, loving your fate, becomes essential for the man who lives without feminine touch. You must learn to not just accept, but actively embrace your solitary existence as exactly what you need for your development. This isn't resignation or making the best of a bad situation. It's recognizing that your current circumstances, including your lack of romantic partnership, are perfect for who you're becoming. The man who can say yes to his solitude without bitterness or regret has achieved a level of self-acceptance that most people never reach. Amor fati requires you to stop viewing your single status as temporary or problematic and start seeing it as your chosen path toward greatness. Every moment of loneliness becomes an opportunity for self-discovery. Every challenge you face alone becomes proof of your individual strength. You stop waiting for life to begin when you find the right person and start living fully in your current reality. This shift in perspective transforms solitude from something you endure into something you celebrate as uniquely yours. The practice of loving your fate means embracing not just the benefits of solitary life, but also its difficulties and limitations. You accept that you might miss certain experiences that come with partnership, while gaining others that are only possible in solitude. The man who truly loves his fate as a solitary being becomes unshakable because he's found peace with exactly who and where he is. His contentment comes from within, rather than external validation or companionship. The path of the solitary man is not for everyone, but for those brave enough to walk it, the rewards are extraordinary. Nietzsche showed us that greatness requires the courage to stand alone, to create your own values, and to become who you truly are without the comfort of constant companionship. The man who lives without feminine touch isn't missing out on life. He's discovering a different kind of existence that prioritizes self-mastery over social validation. But here's the question that will determine your future. Are you living alone because you're building something magnificent, or are you hiding from the challenge of authentic connection? Are you using solitude as a tool for transformation or as an escape from growth? The choice between becoming an Ubermensch or remaining a last man is yours to make every single day. If this exploration of masculine solitude has challenged your assumptions about what it means to live fully as a man, subscribe to this channel for more philosophical insights that will transform how you think about yourself and your potential.